Good afternoon. We'd like to welcome you to our What's Buzzin' at Georgia Tech webinar series. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Director Ronald Mazik, talking about student conduct, student integrity, what that means at Georgia Tech, how the office is here to support your student academically. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to Ron. If you have any questions for Ron throughout the presentation, please feel free to utilize the Q&A chat box. Once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to utilize the Q&A chat box. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Director Ron Mazik.
Thank you so much, Tyler. And thank you for joining us this afternoon. I really appreciate you taking some time to learn and to hear more information about what is a very, very important subject for us here at Georgia Tech, which is student integrity. So I'm going to share my screen now. I have prepared a very brief presentation for you. And as Tyler mentioned, I will be available to address any questions that you have at the conclusion of the presentation. 1 second here. Do up my screen. Now the screen is not coming up. Give me a second. Tyler, are you able to pull it up? It's not allowing me to share my presentation for whatever reason.
Yeah. Give me about 10 seconds. I'll have that ready to go.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share now. Can you see it, Ron?
Yes, I can. You can go ahead and go from the beginning of the show. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So getting started, as I mentioned, the core topic of integrity is a very important issue here at Georgia Tech, and we want to make sure that we're providing you with the appropriate information to support your student as they try to successfully matriculate through the Institute. And we want to make sure that you know what resources are available throughout the process as it relates to the code of conduct and academic integrity. So a brief outline of what we'll try to cover today. We'll talk a little bit about the mission and an overview of the purpose of the office. Very quickly talk about the code of conduct, where you can find it, as well as the academic honor code. I will do a very quick review of the policies within the non-academic and academic codes of conduct, tell you a little bit of information about the process, and then I'll talk a little bit about some additional policies and other things that I think it would be really important for you as parents, family, and supporters of our students to be aware of. We'll talk about how you can help from your very special and unique position in our students' lives. And then lastly, and what I think most importantly, I'll open the floor for questions for anyone who has something that they would like me to address. We can move forward, Tyler. So again, a little bit about the Office of Student Integrity. Our purpose, very simply put, is we facilitate the academic and non-academic code of conduct process for the Institute. All right, and so I'll get into a little more information about exactly what that entails here in a second. But what I think is even more important is our mission, right, which is to inspire students to strengthen their personal character by promoting and upholding Georgia Tech's core value of integrity. And I would challenge that this is applicable not only to the way that our students conduct themselves in the classroom, but how they carry themselves outside of the classroom as well. When we talk about integrity being a core value, we're talking about that being something that is infused pretty much in every aspect of your life as a member of the Georgia Tech community. And so when we talk about and look at our code of conduct and our academic honor code, first I'd like to say if you are looking to get a more in-depth understanding and kind of look at these specific policies, all of Georgia Tech's policies are housed within our policy library, which you can just go to Georgia Tech's home site webpage and go into the search engine and type in policy library, and you can find the, pretty comprehensive list of all of our policies and procedures. As it relates specifically to the Code of Conduct and the Academic Honor Code, you can find those on the Office of Student Integrity's website, which is osi.gatech.edu. But when we talk about the Code of Conduct, we're talking about that comprehensive set of expectations and standards that are applicable to every student within the Georgia Tech community. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are creating an environment that is conducive to academic excellence. Now, I know that's the way that it reads, academic excellence, but again, as I've stated, we're talking about all around excellence. And I think when we talk about the type of students that are attracted to Georgia Tech and that attend Georgia Tech, we know academic excellence is almost a foregone conclusion, right? That is something that our students come through the door expecting, not only of themselves, but of the environment, of the academic challenges that they're going to face. They are already set for excellence. It's our job to complement that and to make sure that we're taking a look at excellence from a holistic standpoint. One of the things that students, when they do accept admission into Georgia Tech, whether they are aware of it or not, they silently read the Academic Honor Code Agreement. All right, which reads, having read the Georgia Institute of Technology Academic Honor Code, I understand and accept my responsibility as a member of the Georgia Tech community to uphold the honor code at all times. And in addition, I understand my options for reporting honor violations as detailed in the code. Now, I can say, having been in some other institutions, many times I don't expect that students have always read the honor code or the code of conduct. Since I've been at Georgia Tech, I will say that is absolutely not the case. Our students are reading the policies. They're aware of the policies and they understand the policies. And so when it comes to the academic honor agreement, we know that we are all on the same page in terms of our agreement with the institution. And again, all centering back around to making sure that we are upholding the institute's key value of integrity. So I would like to take a second and to just talk a little bit about the policy itself and some of the information that you can find within it. So within our code of conduct, you will find that there are 21 total non-academic misconduct violations. And I've not listed all of them here, but what I have included are some of the ones that we see most commonly. Now, unfortunately, it's probably no surprise that, I've bolded alcohol there because like you'll find on an overwhelming majority of college campuses, the number one violation that we see from a non-academic standpoint is something related to alcohol. And that can be a number of different things. It could be use or possession. It could be consumption in an unauthorized area. It could be using a fake ID in an attempt to acquire alcohol, or it can be any sort of disruption, endangering behavior or disorderly conduct that occurs as a result of alcohol playing an influence in that incident. And so, with that being said, I think this is where having access to parents and family and other supporters who understand this information and understand the negative impacts that going through a process and having certain things on your record could have to some of the plans that we know are very, very high achieving and motivated students have. And we want to make sure that we're supporting them and making decisions that reflect the very grand and accomplishable goals that they have. You can share. And as I mentioned, we also enforce the academic honor code. So within that policy, there are 9 violations. All right, 9 academic misconduct policy violations, and they're listed as unauthorized access, unauthorized collaboration, plagiarism, false claims of performance, grade alteration, deliberate falsification, forgery, distortion, and unauthorized use of intellectual property. The overwhelming majority of violations that are reported are in relation to plagiarism. All right, so you can see here from the last academic year, there were about 58% of the total academic violations reported were related to plagiarism in some way. We have a number of students who, plagiarism may look a little different when you're in an environment, in a technical environment. I know that many of us are familiar with, submitting and not properly citing written work, but this also is applicable to coding. So when we have students who are, maybe there's code online and there are people who borrow code from other places online, and that is something that could potentially be viewed as plagiarism. And so again, this is an educational opportunity for students to understand exactly what that means within a particular discipline. The second thing that we see more often is unauthorized collaboration. And this is just when parties are collaborating on a particular assignment where the syllabus or the professor has otherwise stated that that is not acceptable. What I encourage students to do, and I share with you to really encourage your student to do, is to review that syllabus. Review that syllabus. The syllabus is the contract between students and that faculty, how a student knows what is expected, what is acceptable, and what is not within a particular course. If we look at something like plagiarism, for example, there are some courses where a faculty may say, well, certain information is common knowledge. I'm really not expecting you to, cite that, quite as according to the regulations. I'm more interested in the content. But that is an agreement that faculty has made with that particular class in a specific course, and maybe only in relation to a specific assignment. So that is why communication with that faculty and reviewing that syllabus is very important. Same thing with unauthorized collaboration. There may be faculty who will allow collaboration on one assignment, but not on another, right? Or there may be some faculty who don't allow it at all. So most times you're going to find that detail in the syllabus. And in those instances where it's not detailed in the syllabus, it is most likely going to be detailed on the specific assignment directions that are provided to students. So we want to make sure when in doubt, I encourage students to ask the questions. Faculty are always willing to address it. They're always willing to answer those questions. But presenting those questions are always better than just guessing or assuming. And we can move. So shifting gears just a little bit, now that we've talked a little bit about what the policy entails and what specific violations or prohibited behaviors are included within the policy, I do want to talk briefly about the process itself so that you're familiar what steps we take and what steps a student who is engaging in this process will go through. As you can see here, what's detailed is specifically related to academic violation. So the first thing that I'll say is anyone can submit a report of an allegation of misconduct. And so it can be faculty, it can be staff, it can be students, it could be a community member, it could be a parent, it could be family. Anyone can submit those reports directly on the Office of Student Integrity's website. We have a referral link. If it is something that is academic in nature, of course, we're typically receiving those from the faculty or the TA who's assigned to a particular course. The first thing that they're going to do is they are going to notify us that a violation or allegation has potentially occurred. And then they're going to determine whether a student is eligible for what we call a faculty conference resolution, all right, an FCR. And what that basically means is it's an opportunity to resolve it directly with your faculty. Students who have prior conduct history are not eligible for a faculty conference resolution. The faculty conference resolution is also optional, which means that a student does not have to accept the faculty conference resolution. They can elect not to engage in that process and to move forward with the more formal process with the Office of Student Integrity. But again, that first step is usually the FCR. Again, if a FCR is not reached, then that is when the Office of Student Integrity will come into playing a bigger role. We'll reach out to the student and we'll request that a meeting be scheduled within 5 business days. Once that meeting is scheduled, within that meeting, we're going to discuss a couple of things with students. We're going to first discuss their due process rights. All students are provided specific rights under the code, and we want to make sure that they are aware of what their rights are. And then we're going to discuss their resolution options. And these are basically the methods by which we can come to resolving whatever the particular matter is. The first one is called informal resolution. Again, it's not applicable in all instances. It's really not used very much in academic cases because the FCR tends to be very similar to an informal resolution. But it is there, and it is something that we have the ability to apply. The next is called an administrative resolution or administrative review, which is the most utilized resolution method. And that basically, as it's written, means that the student is giving the administrator that they're meeting with the permission and ability to resolve that matter. And then finally, there is electing to go to a student conduct hearing panel, which basically means that the student would like to have a panel convened who will ultimately determine what the outcome of that particular incident should be. Once that selection is made, the student will then receive an outcome email from the hearing officer, which will ultimately detail whether the student was found responsible or not responsible. Again, this is an institutional process, an academic process. Our language mirrors that. It's not a legal process, so we're not dealing with guilt and innocence. We're dealing with responsibility and accountability. And so students are found responsible or not responsible. And then at the conclusion of that, if a student is for whatever reason found responsible, they do have appeal options. For students who have not had anything that elevated to a suspension or expulsion, there's only one level of appeal, and that is to the Associate Vice President and Dean of Students. For those who have, for whatever reason, been subject to suspension or expulsion from the institution, there are various other levels of appeal, the next one being to the President of the Institute, and then finally to the Board of Regents, which represents the final level of appeal. Now, this process is very similar to the process for non-academic misconduct. The only difference is, since it isn't involving an academic matter, there are no FCRs. And so once we receive the report, the office immediately notifies the student to schedule a meeting within 5 business days. And then we move forward with the rest of the process the same way that we would if it were an academic process. So the standard of evidence that is applied in a student conduct process is very different than most people are familiar with. You know, particularly if you watch like Law and Order and things of that nature, most people are probably familiar with like the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. I can tell you that is a very high standard. That is what would be considered like a 99.9% standard. We use what is called a preponderance of the evidence standard. All right. And what that is essentially referred to is the more likely than not standard. If we had to quantify it, it would be called 50% and a feather, right? Not even 51%. We're looking for information that would tilt the scale in one way or the other to determine that a student was either responsible or not responsible. And this is the common standard that you're going to see used not only within the university system of Georgia, but at many colleges and universities throughout the country. It's a very, very common standard within education. We can move. And so what are some outcomes? So, you know, should a student be found responsible in a student conduct process? There are a number of potential outcomes that could occur. Of course, depending on the independent circumstances of the particular violation that occurred, as well as the supporting information surrounding that particular violation. And so potential outcomes include warning, receiving probation, which essentially is like a warning with a window of time attached to it, during which if another violation were to occur, a party could potentially have a more elevated sanction. Of course, there's always there's suspension, and then of course expulsion, which is complete separation from the institute. One of the things we also have, and I am looking to expand this greatly because I really feel that the student conduct process at its core is meant to be a developmental and supportive process. It's meant to complement the overall academic mission of the Institute. But they're educational and developmental sanctions. So, for instance, if there's an alcohol violation, we have programs such as Alcohol EDU and Choices that are available to students as a sanction, which are really about educating students about the use of alcohol and the potential effects on the body, as well as the potential impacts that it can have on your academic endeavors. And again, that is something that we as an office are looking to expand, not only within the area of alcohol, but as it relates to all of our violations. Another thing that I do want to point out is as it relates specifically to academic violations, what we follow for consistency throughout our programs, we actually have an academic sanctioning grid, which is something that was created and agreed to by the faculty, and is something that is applied very consistently as it relates to academic options. So to give you kind of an example of what that would mean, for a first violation, a student would not only receive one of the outcomes you see here, but there would be an academic penalty as well. So for a first violation, there would be a warning, and then there would be an F on that particular assignment. For a second violation, there could be probation, and then there would be a failure of the overall course. For any additional violations, there could potentially be suspension from the institution, as well as a failure in the overall course. And that is something that you can find detail on the Office of Student Integrity's website to get more details of exactly how that sanction and model is laid out. In addition to that, we also have certain publishing responsibilities, and you can find all of this information again on the Office of Student Integrity's website. But every year we do publish the annual conduct data. And you can find that information from the year before last is published, and last year's data will be published within the next few weeks. The data is done. It's just being put into the appropriate spreadsheet, and it'll be made available for review in the upcoming weeks. We also publish all student organization conduct history. We think it's very important for our students who are looking to engage in extracurricular activities, for them to be aware and be able to make an educated decision about what organizations they want to be involved with. And so in 2018, the Institute decided that it was going to post any student conduct history. All right, and that remains posted permanently. You can go to the website and find that information as well. Another thing that we now post, which is a very new is a very new development, is we post the hazing conduct history. So as of July 1st of this year, we have been required by the state of Georgia to post any hazing conduct history. And that information remains posted for no less than 5 years. And so you can find that new information on the Office of Student Integrity's website as well. And so for you all who are parents and family, I think that is a good resource. As you work with your students and they start to communicate with you about the extracurricular activities, something that you can share and just make sure that they are familiar with, but also familiarize yourself with it, so that if they're sharing things with you, you're able to, respond in an informed way. And so, transitioning some additional policies. One of the things that I think it's important to point out is the Institute now has a very comprehensive definition of hazing. All right, and this is a new addition to the policy, where you can go and look at the code of conduct and you can see very clearly spelled out what constitutes hazing on Georgia Tech's campus. All right, and a couple of key things to point out is, when we talk about jurisdiction, it doesn't matter where it occurs. It can occur on or off campus. It doesn't just have to be mental. It is something that can, it doesn't just have to be physical. I know that stereotypically, people usually go to what they call the big H hazing, right, which are usually the most egregious forms of it. But there are a lot of different behaviors on the spectrum of hazing. Some of them that may not be physical, but could potentially be mental. And so we want students to know that mental hazing is also prohibited. And then the last one I'll point out is that it's regardless of the willingness of the participant. sometimes someone said, well, I agreed to it, but if it's in pursuit of membership into an organization, it does not matter if someone is agreeing to the behavior. If it falls within this definition of hazing, it is something that will still be considered that. Another new development that, as parents and families is very important to be informed about is very recently, the act of hazing became a criminal act in the state of Georgia. And it is something that is considered a misdemeanor, and something that if an individual was found guilty, and we're talking about, again, about criminal behavior, it could result in up to a year in jail and a $5,000 fine. And so this is not only for those engaging in hazing, but it's also for those who were aware of it or a witness to it and did not provide reasonable assistance to those who were being subject to the behavior. And so this is a very new development, something that this current group of students are dealing with, for the first time, right? They're the first group who have now been admitted and are going through a fall semester with this new law in place. And it's very important that, and that you share that information with your student in the same manner that we will be educating the campus as well. And so with that said, how do you report? Should you be informed of any of these violations, including hazing, but particularly something like hazing? You can report that directly to the Office of Student Integrity. Again, we have the referral link on our website. When you look at the hazing data, the published data that we have, there are tabs there for you to report as well, either through the referral link or to report anonymously. You can also report directly through Fraternity and Sorority Life. They have the tab on their page, which allows parties to submit reports. And then lastly, as I've mentioned, since now we do know that hazing does have the potential to be considered criminal behavior, you can also report that directly to the Georgia Tech Police Department or the local police department within the jurisdiction where you believe the action is taking place. And then the other policy that I just wanted to touch on briefly, just from an information standpoint, is our sexual misconduct or our Title IX policy. Georgia Tech is part of the University System of Georgia, and we have what we call a system-wide policy. And that means that we have the same policy at every institute within the university system. So every school, with the 26 institutions, they're all going to subscribe to the information that you see here. And so the prohibited behaviors are listed as dating violence, domestic violence, non-consensual sexual contact, non-consensual sexual penetration, sexual exploitation, harassment, and stalking. And that is where you will find them listed. Again, this is in the policy library, and you can find a more detailed explanation and listing of that policy. But more importantly, I think it's important for you to know, again, how to report. The Institute has welcomed a new Title IX coordinator. Her name is Chris Griffin, and I've included her contact information, and she is the direct point of contact to report any behavior of sexual misconduct or Title IX that has come to your attention. Because again, remember, as family, as parents, as supporting parties, you too have the ability to report incidents to the Institute. All right, some additional things to know. So the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act basically states that student records are protected. Student conduct records are considered student educational records, okay? And so what does that mean? In a very practical sense, what that means is that we are not allowed, as the Office of Student Integrity, really as an institute, but speaking specifically for the Office of Student Integrity, we're not allowed to share information with any third party, including parents, family, or supporting parties, about a student's student conduct record without their written permission. Okay, and so I know that can be challenging. We do receive calls from parents sometimes who want updates on, or want information about what they believe their student is experiencing. And, I want to say now that we're not able to share any information. So it's not that, if you make that call that someone is attempting to be difficult or, unnecessarily helpful. It's that we are prohibited by federal law from sharing that information without the student's permission. So how do you get that information? The first thing that I say is very important is make sure that you're maintaining open communication with your student, right? That's the best way to get information firsthand. If they feel they can trust you, they feel that communication is open, they can come to you without fear, that I don't want to say without fear of judgment because we're talking about conduct, and there may be times for some difficult conversations, but as long as they feel like the conversation is there and open for them to have with you, that is the best way to approach it. The other things that you can do when a student brings a party with them to a meeting, they do not need to have written permission. If a student is present and through that active consent is allowing another party to participate in a meeting, we will allow that party to participate. But if any party wants information where that student is not present, say for instance, if you're calling the office and you want an update, we do have a written, what we call a FERPA waiver, which has to be completed by the student and submitted to the office before we can communicate with any other party about their student conduct information. And so, again, I think that's very important to know. Also, understanding where you can find our campus resources. There are a number of them, and I've just provided some general information and websites that you can go and look into further. The first is Success Resources. These are where you can find, academic support services, tutoring, things of that nature. Students can just go to success.godtech.edu. GT Care, which is basically the intake space in determining from a well-being and mental care standpoint what support services a student may need and how we can connect that student with those resources. You can find more information about that at care.godtech.edu. And then lastly, the Counseling Center. We know, that we went through a very trying time over the last, over a year or so. And, we want to make sure that we, again, are providing holistic support for all of our students. And one of the ways that we do that is by providing counseling services free of charge in most cases to our students. And you can just go to counseling.godtech.edu to get more information about that as well. All right. And lastly, and again, importantly, I think it's imperative for you to know how you can assist your student in matriculating successfully through the Institute. And the first thing I would say is encourage your student to be informed. All right. Encourage your student to read the student code of conduct. As I mentioned earlier, that is not as difficult at an institute like Georgia Tech. Our students want to know. Our students enjoy being informed. And I think that it's just about getting this on their radar so they can understand the rules of the road, right? And we want to make sure that we're playing an active role in making sure that they get that information. We want you to discuss academic expectations with your student. We know that our students hold themselves to high expectations, and we just want to make sure that they are utilizing the appropriate support services and that they don't feel the need to cut corners or to take shortcuts. And also that they don't inadvertently make decisions just because, they haven't had an opportunity to review the entire syllabus and they missed the fine print. We want to make sure that you're discussing those academic expectations with them. In order to do this, it's going to be important for you to understand the process. So not just reading the code, but understanding the process. And so I kind of walked you through the various steps that a student would experience if they went through a process with the office. It's important for you to know those as well. So should the student, let's say, choose you as the family or parent advisor, you are aware of exactly what that process is going to entail, and you can advise them appropriately. Next, I would say pay attention to any warning signs. If you notice, that you've not heard from a student in a while, right? You want to do those care checks and just make sure that you're getting in touch with them to check in and just making sure that they're on the path and everything is still positive and in a good space. If you're communicating with them and you're noticing certain shifts in their behavior, right? So maybe they are talking to you, but they just don't sound like themselves. Maybe it's just that, they got a tough test coming up, and that's fine. We expect that, but maybe it's something else. So we just want to make sure that we are being attentive. Um, who are their social circles? Who have they decided to spend their time around? And ultimately, just making sure that they are remaining in a positive space and that they know ultimately that there's someone who cares and someone who is concerned about their success as it relates to being a student at Georgia Tech. Know how to report, which I've shared some information about that with you today. So really taking that information down, and should you become privy to some of the information related to this, and you feel that your student is experiencing some adverse behavior, that as a supporter, how to report that information. And then the last one, just being aware of support resources. Again, so when you are aware, not only can you pay attention to the warning signs, you can also make suggestions, right? Students may just not know that there are certain things available to them on campus, and so it's our job as an entire community, and that includes, of course, us on campus, but our supporters as well, our parents and family, to make sure that they're able to point students in the right direction. In many instances, they're going to present to you before they present to us, right? They're going to present to those people they're closer to when they're having challenges or issues or concerns much sooner than they may bring it to the attention of an administrator. And so having the ability to be informed of the support resources and then direct students in that way, I think has the potential to be hugely beneficial. And that is it as far as the presentation. Now I would like to open the floor for questions. We can keep this slide up, but this just includes all of the contact information for the Office of Student Integrity, as well as a list of some of our team members. All of us are here to support your students. We're here to support you as well. And, we're really excited about the opportunity to continue to work with you as we move forward through the year. And with that said, I'd open the floor.
Appreciate you, Ron.
Thank you.
Let's see. Seems that we have one question for you. Even though the legal system allows for expunging records with good conduct, why would GT publish conduct results permanently? Sometimes students do not intend to be in violation, but yet do need to take accountability. There is no process to expunge the code record with good character or grades.
Right. So I'll try to break this up. So when we talk about publishing the record permanently, we're talking about an organizational record. So it's not an individual student record. That is only as it relates to student organizations. Independent student, like individual student records, are also protected by FERPA. So that is not something that we publish. And so that is not something that you can find if you go to Student Integrity's website or anywhere else. Specifically as it relates to student organizational behavior, though, yes, they are not protected by FERPA. That is not something, when they're found responsible, that is not something that can be expunged, to use the language that was used here, because we want to essentially allow students to make an informed decision, right? To look at the history of a particular organization on this campus and to know whether or not that's something that they think that they want to be involved in, particularly as it relates to their interaction with student conduct. With an individual student record, what I will say is this: if you look at our, what would they call it, background request information, which is also on the student OSI's website. The only thing that we publish, or not necessarily publish, but that we will provide in way of student record, is when a student is suspended or expelled from the institution. So when a third party entity, let's say if a student is attempting to go to medical school, and we get the application. As it relates to student records, the records that are, you know, quantified in terms of a student has a record, a conduct record, that would be considered if a student is suspended or expelled from the institution. All other things students have to make, if a student has an alcohol violation that they weren't suspended or expelled from, they have to make a decision about how they disclose that information on an application. That's not something that we would share, but they have to make a decision about, based on the particular wording of an application, how they want to release that information.
Great. Next question I have for you: if a student is encountered with your office through a non-academic misconduct, such as alcohol, drugs, or what have you, do you all make recommendations to kind of maybe get them further assistance if they need it, kind of help them get steered back on the right path?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we do, and I've used this word a few times in the presentation, is we try to look at things holistically. So what we know is no two students are the same, no two set of circumstances are the same. Even if the violation as listed in the code is the same, two alcohol cases may look completely different. And so two students' needs as we respond to that might be different. The good thing about having an interconnected dean of students office and campus is, we all work together. So it's very easy for us to get students connected to GT Care or to the counseling center, or to point them in the direction of academic resources. Even some of the sanctions, again, that we facilitate, like alcohol EDU or choices, are really more around a developmental approach. It's not meant to be punitive in nature. It's really to talk about alcohol consumption from an educational standpoint, so that students can make more educated and informed decisions in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. If a student approaches their mom or dad or a family member and says, "Hey, I have a paper coming up, kind of tough, not sure if I'm plagiarizing, kind of gray," what advice would you give to the parent to kind of respond to their student? Should they reach out to the professor or your office? What should they do?
So in a situation like that, and again, referencing, I think, some of the things I was able to cover, I would first point that student in the direction of their syllabus, as well as if there were any specific directions given for that assignment. And hopefully it's spelled out there. In most cases, it's going to be spelled out there, what the particular faculty's expectations are as it relates to submitted materials around plagiarism. If there are still questions, I would encourage the parent or family to direct the student to contact the faculty directly and to say, "Hey, I have some questions about this. I just want to make sure that I'm clear. I want to submit, acceptable work," and to just have a conversation with the faculty. And I think that will ultimately lend itself to answering most of those questions. But when in doubt, always ask the faculty, because again, things may vary depending on the faculty. What's acceptable in one course with one faculty may be completely unacceptable in another, depending on the nature of that course and the assignments that are within that particular class.
Gotcha. Also going back to non-academic misconduct, since your time here at Tech, what advice would you give to parents to just kind of have their student try to remove themselves or not be around situations that can cause them to be in a place that they didn't intend to? They're just kind of a third party, and they kind of get associated with the acts of somebody else who actually is doing the misconduct, but they're kind of wrapped into it as well. What advice would you give to parents and students?
Absolutely. I'll tell you something that my parents told me as I prepared to go to college. They said, "Show me your friends, I'll show you your future." And basically, what I amounted that to is surrounding yourself with positive people, right? I think that is critical, not only to, success in college, but success in life. But particularly in an environment like this, you want to surround yourself with people who aren't going to put you in positions to be in environments like that, right? Or people who the same way that you are looking at an environment and kind of questioning and thinking like maybe I ought to remove myself, you're able to look at your friend next to you and they're looking the same way. And they're like, I think we're ready to go. I think we've seen enough and it's probably time for us to not be here anymore. Um, we know that peer influence plays a huge role in the decisions that people make within, college and university environments. And so I think that that's a great place to start saying, choose friends and choose organizations and events that speak to, who you are, that speak to the core of who you are and ultimately what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And I think it also goes back to maintaining that open dialogue, because in order to even have those conversations, you have to have a relationship with the student where they feel comfortable coming to you, in a very informal way and having open and direct conversations. So that's what I would recommend.
Great. To any parents or family members who may have students living in the residence hall, to what extent would a conduct case get elevated to your office?
That's a great question. So within the residence hall, we use very similar language. Students within the residence hall are also still, held accountable to the overall code of conduct and academic honor code, but they do enforce it a little bit differently within the residence hall. So for most violations, those are actually viewed as like housing contract violations. So they have like a community standards that students have to uphold. We will typically see things that are elevated to like a more egregious level. So something that speaks to the overall safety and security of the institution or of that particular community, that is something that will come to us. If it's something that is of a repetitive nature, so if a student has repeatedly violated a policy, that is something that housing can then, or Res Life can then elect to turn over to the Office of Student Integrity. And so we work very closely with Housing and Res Life. If they have a situation that they think has kind of escalated beyond their capacity to handle it internally, we have a liaison that we speak to, and we can kind of make those decisions together, right? We'll look at it, as I've mentioned, no two cases are the same, and we'll look at it and we'll say, yeah, this is definitely something that needs to be handled from a more elevated position, and those are the ones that we typically take.
Great. And for the appeal process, whether it may be the student with the president, or I think there's another type of appeal process. Can parents sit in on the appeal process if they have the permission? How does that work?
So the appeal process it's a document review process. It is not a hearing process. So there are no parties to it. The only process that has the ability to have parties to it is as you go through the general resolution process. So an advisor who could be a parent, any party of the student's choosing, can participate all the way up and through the hearing for the first level of resolution. Once that decision is rendered, if a student appeals to the AVP Dean of Students, that is a document review process. So that means all of the information that was available for that particular case will be turned over to the AVP Dean of Students for review, and he will ultimately make a decision. If the student is still found responsible and elects to appeal to the president, it is also a document review process. So they'll get that information, and then the president or designee will have the ability to make a decision as well.
Great. I think we have one more question here. Let's see. How can GT help in the process of checks and use of alcohol and other controlled substances in fraternity and sorority life? This past family weekend, I observed publicizing honk for funnel, drinking at a frat, with police being right there. There are underage students exposed in this environment.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think just like you posing the question, you have the ability to report things and to submit that information to fraternity and sorority life. I know we have very dedicated staff within that area who seek to make sure that the Greek community are upholding, their own standards. And I would imagine that something like that would probably not meet those. Uh, from a larger standpoint, I really just think it's an educational process that we really need to put our students through, so that they can understand how alcohol consumption is related to so many other potentially negative outcomes, both academically and non-academically, and how it can relate or have a negative effect on the overall collegiate experience. And I think that that's something that you'll see we'll do, a much more expansive job of educating the community in the years to come.
Yeah. And I think in regards to those type of events, they do have to register those social gatherings. They do have to have alcohol monitors, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
and I think the student also has the ability to report as well if they see any underage drinking anonymously.
absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's all the questions we have, Ron. If you have any closing remarks or just any words of encouragement that you would like to leave with the parents or family members, please feel free.
I just say thank you, for joining us today. Thank you for your time. I appreciate any opportunity that I get to speak to parents and family. I'm getting ready to launch my own college student next year, so I understand how it can be, really wanting to be informed about what your student is experiencing. And I would just add that, the Office of Student Integrity is not the boogeyman. That I don't want students, family, or our supporters to feel that. We are here to support students. We have an open door policy. As I mentioned, I may not be able to talk directly about student information, but we can talk about the process in general as much as you like. So feel free to reach out to myself or any of my team members with any of your general questions, and we will be more than happy to answer.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ron. And just parents and families, so you know, this will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. So just in case you want to refer back to anything, we will have that recording ready for you. And I also would encourage you to join us next week as we will be hearing from our AVP and Dean of Students, John Stein. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much. Have a great day.